This happened back in 2009, but after finding this sub, I felt compelled to share. My husband and I were 21, just moved into our first apartment, and I was about 6 months pregnant. The small one-bedroom apartment we found wasn't one of those nicer, corporately owned communities. It was more like a slumlord situation, but rent was cheap and we were just getting started in life. Now, a little backstory. The city we were in was still close to family, and my husband had a great aunt we knew lived nearby. She was one of those family members we would only see at big family reunions, so it wasn't like we had a close relationship. As a great aunt, she was one of like 13 children. You know, back in the day when everyone had 1,000 kids, and she had been married for many years with 4 of her own children. They were all mostly grown up, but being that this was over a decade ago, her youngest was maybe 16 or so at the time. We hardly ever saw him at reunions because he was one of those gang-banging kids that was always getting into trouble. Apart from his poor choices, he was born with a very striking facial deformity that really gave him a unique appearance. We'll call him E. So we had just moved in 2 weeks prior to this incident. I was only working part-time, so I came home early in the day and continued to unpack and organize until my husband got home in the evenings. Our then English bulldog was my faithful companion, and although they have a lazy stigma, she was a great guard dog. So it was early evening and there was still light out when I started hearing banging or prying of some sort coming from the back of the apartment where our bedroom was. On the other side of our bedroom, the back wall faced the parking lot, so we got a significant amount of noise when people came and went. At first, I figured it had to be a gardener or someone loading things from their car. As the noise continued, I realized it was right up against that wall. I peeked out our window, but due to the angle, I really couldn't see much. This noise obviously aggravated our dog, who wouldn't stop barfing. You dog owners know what I'm talking about, and it was starting to make me scared. Cheap rent came with some shady neighbors, and we quickly realized this wasn't going to be a long-term residence. So, this noise continued. My dog continued to barf, and I was getting freaked out because I couldn't see anything outside our window and I didn't have the guts to go investigate. I was really pregnant, and I don't like running even when not pregnant. Finally, my husband made it home just as it's getting dark, and at this point I hadn't heard the noise for nearly an hour. Of course, I tell him right away that I had been freaked out for the last few hours because of banging, prying, and moving going on outside. So yes, he went to investigate and came back saying nothing seemed out of place. Later that same night, we had made dinner, eaten, and my husband was shaving in the bathroom getting ready to take a shower before bed. Suddenly I hear him yell, "Hey!" in the deepest booming voice I had ever heard. I come quickly running to the living room and I see my husband in his boxers stretched from just outside the bathtub with both his hands on the small windows still inside the shower and tub. I ask him what happened, and he turns with an alarming look on his face and says, "Someone's cut the screen." I had chills go straight down my spine and was basically frozen. He yelled for them to get out of here, when some more movement started happening and he slammed the window shut and locked it. This is the uncomfortable part. As soon as he turned around again, out of breath, he says to me, "That was my cousin E." I was so shocked. I asked him if he was sure, and he says he could recognize that face anywhere. And then he started questioning what the odds were that E recognized him, and to this day we really didn't know. Immediately following the incident, we had the manager replace the screen and I placed a dowel in the window to keep it shut. We lasted 9 months in that complex and will never rent from a slumlord again. We have also not seen E since, even before the incident at a family reunion. About 2 years ago, we found out he had been incarcerated and isn't due to be released until 2022. We don't know what the charges were. The family keeps the situation hush-hush, but I truly hope we don't ever see him again.
I was around 11 or 13 at the time. I would always love to go into the woods to just have some fun with my cousins, but sometimes I would stay in my backyard. Sometime in the middle of June that year, something happened that would change the way that I saw those woods. I was attempting to stay the night in my treehouse. It must have been only a few hours until dawn at the time. The treehouse is located at the edge of the woods, and I was alone at the time, or so I thought. I climbed into the treehouse and looked out the window. It was then that I realized I was pretty thirsty, so I decided to go down and walk towards my house. Around that time, I got this feeling that someone or something was watching me. I ignored it and thought it was at most some wild animal. I made it into my house and grabbed my bottle, which had some Myuu in it, which was my favorite drink as a child. As I exited the house, I noticed that our old blonde lab had followed me. He was a good dog. I gave him a quick pet, then went on my way to the treehouse. As I entered the treehouse, I looked out the window, glancing back in the direction of my dog. I noticed that he was no longer watching me. He was instead staring into one particular part of the woods. I'd never seen my dog do that before. If there was something that piqued his interest, he would go check it out. I'd never seen him just stay still like that, as if he was scared. But then he began to make this low, deep growl. I called out to him, "Rocky, what do you see, boy?" He turned to look up at me, but only for a split second, then went right back to staring at that spot in the woods. It started to rain and thunder, but along with those sounds came another, a sort of humming that was coming from my right. Immediately, I felt scared, chilled to the bone. I looked out the window that was facing the direction of that sound. I saw it, something that horrified me, that didn't make sense. A creature that I'd never seen or heard of before. It was standing at the forest floor and was a little too close to the treehouse. It was big, skinny, brown. It was looking up at my treehouse with reddish-brown eyes. I thought to myself, do I run to the house, or do I stay up here? I crouched beneath the window so that it could not see me, and I decided to stay until morning. The next day, I hurried down the treehouse and began to run as fast as I could out of the woods. After that incident, I didn't want to go into the woods ever again, because whatever that thing was could still be lurking out there, waiting for its next meal.